Hello and welcome back. For today's episode, I'm just so thrilled to have on this next guest. She is one of my all-time favorite professors. She's amazing and you're going to love her. She is a professor at the University of Washington's Professional Actor Training Program. She is a director as well as the director of the Integrative Alexander Technique Studio here in Seattle. And when you're learning more information about her, be sure to check out our website, www.cathymadden.net, as well as her book, author of Integrative Alexander Technique for Performing Artists and Teaching the Alexander Technique. So please welcome Cathy Madden.
Samantha, I'm just delighted to be here and to get a chance to talk about the work that matters to us.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I really felt that, getting to study with you for 3 years and then also having you as a director, it's definitely things that I can use every day, even off of the stage, of course. And yeah, so I'm just excited for the listeners to get to hear too. So you are, I'd say, like a guru of the Alexander Technique.
Okay.
And like, that's the way that I think. Cause I remember all the classmates, we would, sometimes people would be like, oh, she's like Yoda. She just knows. She comes in and she just knows. So, I hope you've heard that before.
I have heard the Yoda thing before.
Okay. And I don't watch Star Wars enough to know, hopefully that's a good thing to hear.
It's a fine thing to hear, and when I hear it, I feel really grateful for the woman I studied with, because she really insisted that we be able to, what I would say now, omniserve. That may be a word I wasn't using before, but to receive through all my senses and be able to hear and see and experience what's going on with somebody. So it sometimes appears that I'm omniscient or some sort of thing, but really I'm just observing really very carefully.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think some of the ways that we're trained as actors, it can be, I don't want to say a little unsettling when we use it in the real world. I'll use, for example, when I was studying Meisner technique back at Northwestern, and I had a great teacher for the Meisner, but we spent a lot of time like looking into each other's eyes and just noticing every little thing. And after practicing it for hours on end for that quarter, I would sometimes have a conversation with a non-actor and stare deeply into their eyes. And I would notice this look of, not like panic, but just like, what's she searching for? And I'd be like, oh, right, Samantha, you're not in class. Don't do that right now.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting thing, because I'd say we'd want to, instead of looking in the eyes, we want to receive the whole person. And that includes eyes, of course, but I was trained in Meisner as well and had to sort of go, wait a second, I need a wider reception.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, and I also feel like that's one of the techniques where it can go a lot of different ways for people. I've definitely heard a lot of horror stories of Meisner where people are kind of being emotionally abused, and it's being used almost as a weapon when it's not taught from a kind place.
Right. And I used to co-teach at Freehold in Robin Lynn Smith's class, and so we were really looking at the whole person, and I'm going to say the healthy response.
Yes.
The healthy response. But I spent a lot of time in the hallway while people were prepping, helping them use the Alexander technique to prepare their whole selves to move into the room.
Right. Yeah. Well, and too, with Alexander technique, because I have, one of the reasons why I say, and I promise listeners, we're going to talk about the Alexander technique too, if you're not familiar with it, so we won't leave you in the dark. But, some of other actors that I've met who, had different professors or different teachers, their approach to the Alexander technique sounded so foreign to what I had learned, because it was based more on like, you should stand like this, and they would become more rigid and more constricted. Right. So I was hoping to hear about your approach for the listeners, and then, the differences in that.
Sure. I've started to call my work Integrative Alexander Technique, which in some ways to me is redundant, but it is part of what you're talking about, that I always apply the work directly to what you're doing. And that in that way it has a kind of flexibility and a kind of test in the moment of life. Does it actually work? Does this does this process, does this way of understanding how we're made and function work? So I'll explain a little bit more. Although I do have a fancy definition of it now. That the fancy definition is that it's constructive, conscious kindness to yourself, cooperating with your design, and serving your desires and dreams.
Doesn't the world need more of that now? I'm looking
Mhm.
at you on the other side there, if you're watching on YouTube, as your whole self. Doesn't the
Yes,
world, can you say that again, Cathy? Because we need
sure.
more of that.
Constructive, conscious kindness to yourself, cooperating with your design, supporting your desires and dreams. Yeah. And it's a very fancy definition, but it does encompass really what I intend in the work. And it does, as you know, come down to, humans are designed in a particular way where the quality of that relationship between the head and spine and movement determines the quality of what we can do. And the interesting thing is that when we interfere with our design, no matter where it comes from, it turns up in that relationship between head and spine.
Mm.
So whenever we're wanting to make a change, if we understand how to restore that underlying coordination as we change an idea, as we change a response, we can integrate. I'm going to say we can integrate kindness in every moment.
Can you talk more about integrating kindness, maybe
Hmm.
ways in which you've seen that happen, of course, with your teaching, and maybe ways
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
are, go against that with,
Ah,
not with your teaching, but
right,
yeah.
right. Well, the first thing I thought of, although it's not all that historical, but one of the things that I realized as we were walking into this pandemic moment, and I would be walking down the street and need to cross the street, or this whole thing of the 6 feet, the mask, the whole thing. I was realizing that the things we were doing historically are signs of disrespect and signs of unkindness. And I mean, and when I did them, I felt bad
Like,
because,
like which things in particular?
well, like someone coming up towards you and backing up,
Oh, I see.
or, or, I always remember this one little girl, because she's little, they apparently can spread really well, but she wanted to run up and, like be with me, and I crossed the street,
Oh.
and I was already using this practice of using the Alexander technique in order to offer kindness while I was backing away. So it was just changing the meaning of the things. And I've helped a lot of people because a lot of people don't like the masks. Well, if you understand it as an act of kindness, which is how it's described, but if you still don't like it and you tighten with it, you still get that little bit of resentment in your system. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can use this Alexander process as you put the mask on, knowing it's an act of kindness, it just changes the overall feeling. So it turns out to be really useful pandemic wise.
Yes. Yes.
So so that we're not constantly feeling like a little icky about how we're relating to people.
Right. And if we're not on board with our thought pattern, if we're not aligned with that thought pattern, it shows up in our, like the fight shows up in our body.
It does, and that would be, that's in all aspects of life. So that
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't even remember a specific example of this, but I just thought of sometimes an actor, is having trouble hearing a note from a director and they tighten.
Yeah.
and teaching people to just continue to coordinate as they receive the note smooths out the relationship. Sometimes it means that the note can be heard. Sometimes it means that another response can come, because the other thing is, if we're tightening in response to things, we lose our creativity. So this turns out to be just this magnificent gateway to cooperate with our design, because we're designed to be creative, responsive beings. And if we've somehow learned to tighten in response to different things, either inadvertently or through some circumstance, this just gives us a way to make new choices. Plus, to know that any choices we've been making up until now are always perfect. They're perfect based on the information we have. When we recognize, oh, woo, maybe I want something else, it isn't that this thing was wrong. It's the thing that led us, in fact, to being able to say, I'd like something else.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's kind of the ultimate kindness as well, because, okay, this is my background. This is what brought me here. Got new information. I can cooperate with that new information, and it turns out to be a lot more enjoyable in general, and a lot more
Right.
effective. A lot more effective. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that relationship to new information and trusting ourselves that we can integrate it,
Mm-hmm.
it helps decrease the resistance in our
Mm-hmm.
bodies and our resistance to taking that new information.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. I wish I could remember I don't I remember you gave me a piece of information like that shifted my thinking in grad school about that's okay. And now you have new information, so you get to
Mm-hmm.
choose with your new information. And it just was
Mm-hmm.
like, and it's so funny that um, that we hold on to, like, I feel like a lot of humans, I felt
Mm-hmm.
that need to be like, well, I was right then and I had to be right. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe I wouldn't hold that towards other people. It would be towards myself. But really, if it was towards myself, it was still towards other people, because
Mm-hmm.
I could only relate to them to the level that I had within myself.
Yeah, and it's probably, and the reason you probably can't remember it is because it's disappeared. It's it's disappeared because the new choices are whatever they were. I obviously don't remember that one either.
I don't remember.
No, I remember. I remember relationally things. I remember the directing the show, and I remember all kinds of sort of relational things. But the specific lessons, they build on each other moment to moment. And you had that question about the sort of, I'm going to call it a more formulaic version of the Alexander process. And I was teaching the Alexander technique before I knew people taught in another way, which is an interesting thing to know. So my teacher was Marjorie Barstow, first graduate of FM's teacher training course. And she was a dancer. That it was her dancing that had taken her there, and she was a horseback rider, and she was from Lincoln, Nebraska. So the woman is really practical. Okay. And you know, I, I I first my first lessons with her were in an acting studio, and it was just doing the stuff we would do in acting. So I've always integrate. That's why I say calling it integrative Alexander technique seems redundant to me. But there are some people who learn in ways where they just do specific set forms.
Mm-hmm.
And um, it certainly is it's a much more restrictive thing. And I would say, and I have said at congresses, is that it's not so useful for performers, because you can't be in a set form. Uh, Actors need to be able to coordinate to make really weird kind of shapes, because not every character moves well. So so I've always had that perspective, um, And as I said before, I think the cool thing about integrating it is you do find out right away, is this on the track of what I need? Um, the people who teach in a more formulaic way would say, if you get it sort of better over here, it will cross over here. I I have a bias. I own it at every Alexander meeting. I have a very strong bias that uh, there's a lot of things that learning it formulaically can get you stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And there's varying degrees of it, so it can't be a complete blanket statement. But why not? Why not just use it with the stuff of life, with picking up a pot, with picking up a child, with um, I don't know, picking up my cat that went by a while ago.
Right.
Yeah.
An Alexander technique was created from Alexander. I don't remember his whole name. Something Alexander, isn't that right?
Frederick Matthias
Oh,
Alexander.
Frederick Matthias. Did you catch
Yes.
that? Frederick Matthias Alexander. That's
Yes.
a mouthful. I love it.
Yes. New tongue twister, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was an actor and he was having trouble with his voice. So the whole thing actually does come out of acting. Um, Wide application now, but beyond acting. But he was having trouble with his voice. He was going to voice teachers and speech teachers and doctors, and things weren't working out. Um, and then he got offered a gig at a theater that was kind of a step up from the kind he'd been working in. And he was a solo reciter. So this, whether or not his voice was there was really
Very
important.
important. Mm-hmm.
And so he asked his doctor if he could take it, and his doctor said, yes, if you don't talk for 2 weeks. So he, probably to the best of his ability, didn't speak for 2 weeks. And he started the performance in full voice, and halfway through, started croaking.
When you said croaking, I was thinking croaking.
Oh
So
dear, sorry. Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, oh no, that would be bad.
Terrible.
No, no, it was just really, lost his voice before the
Wow.
end of the show.
Yeah.
And so he went back to his doctor and asked what to do, and the doctor said, well, we'll keep doing what we're doing. And Alexander was like, well, that hasn't been working. And that sort of sent him into what's in description is a 7 to 9 year process of figuring out that invertebrate coordination, the relationship between head and spine and movement's a key factor in determining our coordination.
Mm-hmm.
It's true in all vertebrates. Like when I teach people who ride horses, as soon as I say that, they go, ah. Because if a horse is tight in that area, the horse doesn't move well, and you have to get that area free first. So the Alexander technique, I mean, it's just vertebrate coordination.
Mm.
So we start with learning to, if I reach for something and I've been pressing down, ugh, okay, that puts a lot of pressure in my system. What I learned to do is to coordinate so that I can reach for it, as I said, cooperating with my design. And that can be so that's an efficient version of it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just acknowledging that not every human activity is efficient. I often give the example of dancers who could take half an hour to get across a room,
Right.
doing very fancy things, but but they could do it with coordination.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so a lot of times, it's just in those simple acts. Do I need to add this to the fact that I'm putting something down or picking it up again?
Right. Yeah, and I feel like that's very effective, especially as an actor, for getting to that place of being, like
Yes,
being the character instead of showing, when we just
abs-
add that extra that we don't actually need, but we want to show, like, I'm doing my job. Look at me acting.
right, right. And I think part of the desire to show is that if you're tight in this relationship, you can have an idea and it doesn't make it through your system clearly.
Right.
So as soon as you come into coordination, those ideas that you have start to manifest in your full self right away. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't experience the need to push.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like this is always a great reminder. Let us know in the comments. I love getting comments, but this is a great reminder for me that when I am off stage and when I'm sitting at the desk typing away, to remember to rakusa, as our class picked for our word. That was our coordination word, rakusa.
Rakusa. Yeah, nice.
Yes. And just to remember that I get to sit at the computer with my whole self and type. I don't have to go into this, was it like centrated or not concentrated? Because we talked about like people hear the word concentrated and they think narrowing versus.
Yeah, they think,
right.
They think centration. They think of only the
Centration.
center rather than there happens to be a center in a wide world.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a great reminder.
I've been teaching a lot of classes that I call Zoomdom to teach people how to coordinate in this environment. Yeah.
Can you talk about one or two of, like, I don't know, highlights or interesting experiences from your Zoomdom? It has such a great name.
One of those things you wait, I want to teach a class about this. Well, okay, I will venture into this one. What's people talk about Zoom fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, as we were teaching online in the spring and everything was moving into Zoom, and I'll note I've taught online for many years, and I direct a play by Zoom last year. It was very bizarre. It's like it worked, but so I wasn't getting tired, and everybody else was, and I'm like, what am I doing? So I just started trying to figure it out, and one of the things is that I'm cooperating with the medium, because if you try to look at a computer screen as if it's a real live person, you try to focus on it like it's a real object, your eyes will get really tight and tired, and then your whole system starts.
Yeah.
But if you simply receive, because pixels are moving, so your eyes can't grab them the way they might. And I know if we go to quantum physics, the real objects are moving too, but let's leave that. But if you look even at the edge of your computer, it's got a more solid line than anything that's going to be on the monitor. And if I try and make the monitor be like that, I'm going to get tight overall, starting with my eyes. But if I just go, well, this is what I have, and it's this wonderful visually aided phone call, then it's a lot easier. And then the other thing, and we're both doing it, but we're moving quite a bit. And a lot of people, because multiple factors, being in front of a screen is often associated with being passive rather than active. So people just kind of sit in the middle and do this. And depending on your setup, we're both choosing to sort of be middle-ish, although I'm on a wobble stool, so I'm moving around quite a bit. But when you're moving too, you've got a moving chair. I do also have people get off center, which, with your microphone, that's not going to work really well. But if you go off center and everybody's off center in the meeting, it puts more movement into the environment. So it's a kind of a design feature. Yeah, so it just makes this funny little difference.
Yeah. That's so neat.
It is. So I guess I'm directing.
Yes.
Let's get in a different relationship to each other.
Right.
Right. So, and the other thing, and I guess it's funny that I mentioned quantum, I think we're communicating to each other through the world. So I'm not, I've got, as I said, visually aided phone call. I do not think there's a Samantha in my. so I tend to move as if I'm in the room with the amount of people I have. So I don't know what my neighbors think of this person, waving about in here, but so I behave as if I'm in, and maybe that's from the acting too. I
Yeah.
behave as if I'm in the room with the people, and sometimes, yeah, and I
Yeah.
look out. I look out as if I'm in a room sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm think I'm you know, I'm also thinking about even when I am on a call or behind a
hmm
computer, the difference in my body if I'm not bringing that awareness, task for
hmm
coordination, all of that, if I'm just, you know,
Yeah.
operating on I'm tired and I'm just doing the thing, right?
Right.
That if I'm doing an activity that I love, like if I'm involved in this call or like doing a coaching or writing something creative, my body language is very different than if I'm
hmm
crunching numbers and doing work that I could care less about. That there's a
hmm
sort of, I think, kind of like
mm
when you were talking about with the mask earlier, there's this
hmm
resistance which registers as tightness.
Right.
And so at moments like that, I have to especially remind myself to integrate
Yeah.
and like allow myself to have my natural
hmm
movement and
hmm
flow.
Yeah. And that usually, usually that comes by finding the yes for why you're crunching the numbers so that your desire also, you could also go, well, I'm just going to coordinate while I do something I don't like, but, but if you're choosing to do it, you probably want to do
Right. Okay, I'm going to repeat that again. If you can't tell, I'm a fan
it.
of repeating these things to make sure you catch it, and it's emblazoned right here too. But yes, that when we're doing an activity that we feel like maybe we don't want to do, to remember the why we do want to do it because we are
Mhm,
doing it, and
mhm.
to heighten that yes for ourselves, right?
Right. And heightening the yes will is sort of a prerequisite for you for restoring coordination.
Yeah.
If we're if we're if we're acting on the no, that will cause us to tighten. So that's the constructive conscious kindness. Where is the yes?
Where's the yes?
Where is the yes?
And I also, for me, I think in those, I'm thinking now of scenarios where I've really felt my body tighten, where it's maybe been like a job that I didn't want or something like that. And I
Right.
felt my body tighten. And actually, a good friend of mine called me out on that. It was when I was new at a restaurant job years
hmm
ago,
hmm
and I was very tight. And my hands were like this. And I was like, just like, and he gave me so much crap about it. And I was like, stop it. I'm being professional. I'm not at the theater right now. No, I didn't say that. It's like, I'm being professional. And
hmm
of course, like that naturally changed after I was there for a while and I got
hmm
comfortable around everybody. I was still
Right.
professional, but my body was loose. And it would have been
hmm
great if I remembered this then, because I could have changed that scenario like
hmm
immediately.
Right.
So I
Right.
think the other piece of that can also be what our preconceived expectations are, or
hmm
the form that isn't helpful to us.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. I suppose in situations that you know you're going into that you have ooh,
Yeah.
um, the the Alexander technique does have this underlying process. Okay, I want to go into this situation even though I'm experiencing obstacles. And then there's a do I want to use my coordination to do that, which is a really important piece of this. That's always you're always free to choose whatever way you want to respond.
Mm-hmm.
But if you choose to use the Alexander process, you start gathering information. So if you know you're going into um, a situation that has challenges in some way for you, I actually usually use the Uta Hagen questions when I'm teaching anybody in any field to gather information about what's going on. So the who are you, the what time is it, where are you, who and what surround you, and what are the events, and then figuring out, do you have anything important to you about any of those events? I do that for life, and then ask the question, what do I want in this moment, the next hour, the next day? How does that relate to my life? Um, so, and then that gives me the ability to plan, to go, okay, I'm going into this situation. It's got some obstacles for me, but rather than be a victim to those obstacles, I, I have created a back pocket plan.
Mm.
So should that obstacle appear, I'm going to ask Tarakusa to coordinate so that I can do X, Y, and Z for the situation. So that's sort of there's the in the moment use of the Alexander
Mm.
technique to reach for those pots, but there
Yeah.
is also that the life one where, oh, okay, every time I go to this meeting, I tighten.
Yeah.
What's going on? And then the next time I go to the meeting, I have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Should it happen again? So I can, again, kindly take care of myself,
Right.
which also helps me get what I want in my life.
Yeah.
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 I was just like, yep, just basking in it. It's, I feel like one of my favorite things of acting training in grad school, especially like UW,
Mm-hmm.
was just the amazing physical training and
Mm-hmm.
having this heightened awareness of, well, what's going
Mm-hmm.
on in my body, and being able to be aware of it and pay attention to it so that I can make more informed choices.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, it's interesting how often the, the the fact that we are a whole self that has
Yeah.
bits that move isn't always included in every sort of change process discussion.
Yeah.
Um, and you have to kind of put it in. So that's what it gives us. I mean, as actors, it gives us the ability to use the instrument for artistic purpose, but it also helps us do that in life. Yeah.
There's one other thing I wanted to, well, there's a few other things, but I wanted to ask. Um, I remember one of the things we talked about was end gaining,
Mm-hmm.
and that definitely can be
Mm-hmm.
detrimental when you're,
Mm-hmm.
when we're like trying to reach for the thing, but we're thinking of, oh, my hand's already on the keyboard and it's going to have this shape versus
Right. Right.
doing a coordination. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. End gaining is a term that just means going towards your end without paying attention to the process. And the sort of the counter to it is means whereby, which is going towards your end but paying attention to the process. So if I sort of oh, I know I could do. I was in a very small film. I'm just thinking, but and a graduate of the program asked me to be in it. It was her script, and I got my scene, and it said, I read the part, and it said, "Mother cries through this whole monologue," and I said, "Oh, that's the acting student's revenge." So, but I mean, it was a comedy, so the degree of crying, it wasn't, it wasn't, yeah. But but in order to do it, you can, as you know, you can't just go, oh, gee, I'll cry. Yeah, you have to create the step by step that will get you there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to figure out what the step by step for this particular character was. If I just gone in and go, oh, I mean, it wouldn't, but this going in and going, okay, I see my daughter in the wedding. I mean, there's something about a wedding. I don't remember the actual thing, but I see my daughter in the wedding dress, and it isn't the wedding dress I wanted her to have. Or, it's sort of, and then I see this, and I see this, and all of these things happen, and then the moment comes, and then I've made the prep, so I've done the step by step by step by step.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch, and you can watch this uh, in good athletes as well. You can't just get a good. I'll use baseball, like, because they all have different routines for batting,
Right.
but they have a routine.
Right.
And if they didn't have, if you dug into it, you'd find out why each one of them is there, but they need the sequence. You can't just, you can't just go, I'm going to hit the ball.
Right.
There's deep training, step by step by step, that you do each time.
Hmm.
And once you rehearse it, it goes pretty fast. It sounds like it would take terribly long, but you practice each step of the way, using the Alexander technique, so that you're maximizing your coordination. And then you're headed towards the end, but often I'm going to say it's a more imaginative, more responsive end, because you have more information feeding it, rather than you guessing, as you said, preconceiving how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more imaginative, I guess that's what I would say. That's the creativity again.
Yeah.
And you always know within that you wouldn't have to follow that path, which is fun.
Right.
You know, you you need to always know that you're, as far as I can tell, if you're an adult and you you have free choice, if you jump off a chair, you're probably going down. But
Right. Right. Well, you
but
could
with
have put on a jetpack.
right. That's true. Now we're getting into that territory. I'll have
Well,
to get
there's the possibility if you properly planned.
right. Exactly. Does that answer that
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and let's see. Okay, so I'm curious, how did you get into the Alexander technique? Because when you started, um, was it as popular as it is now, or
Mm.
how did you decide to get into it?
I was in graduate school at Washington University in St. Louis, uh, and my teacher brought Marjorie Barstow to do a workshop. And it was funny because all he said to me was Sid Friedman, who's in Boston now. Thank you, Sid. Uh, he just said, "Why don't you come? I think you'd like it." That is as much as I knew. And I said, "Okay." And I went in, and what I remember most about that workshop was how my fellow students changed,
Mm.
because I'd been in acting classes with them. And I know I changed too, but I know that there was something. That's the thing I was going, there's something to this. And he kept bringing her. And it was sort of funny. I had decided when I graduated that I was going to move to Lincoln, Nebraska to study with her. So this is pre, looking anything up. You could look it up on the internet or whatever. Would have been other ways. But I was told she was one of the best in the world. I was in St. Louis. You could drive from St. Louis to Lincoln relatively easily. Um, I had a bunch of my friends in a truck. It was very nice. Um, so I moved to Lincoln to learn to teach because, so there are two things. And the funny thing about Sid, I decided to do that, and about 2 weeks after I decided to do that, Sid said, "Why don't you learn to teach this? I think you'd like it." So he was right. But my impulse was partially that I needed a day job as a theater person. And I thought, of all the day jobs, I'd rather teach the Alexander technique than anything else. And it also, the phrase I used at the time is, actors work so hard to do what they care about. They deserve to have what they care about actually work.
Mm.
Because that was my experience, is that prior to the Alexander technique, I was doing everything the director and the acting teachers said, but I would get notes and they'd say, "Why don't you do this at this point?" And I'm like, it's what I thought I was doing.
Yeah.
So that it really was that performers deserve to have their work actually come through them.
Hmm.
And then, it doesn't guarantee that I made all the right choices after that, but at least they saw what I was doing, you know.
Right.
And then, I mean, it did other things. It expanded my range in all kinds of ways. Um, Prior to studying the Alexander technique, I only got cast as nice people, and I started getting cast as villains, and I was like,
Ooh.
really? Ooh. And I conjecture it's just because I was the one who wasn't tightening to be the villain. I was
Right.
just like, all right, I'll go. I don't know. I wasn't, I don't know really if that's what happened because I
D-
just,
Did you have a favorite villain you got to play, or
well,
that
the,
comes to mind?
the first one, because I played May in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And I'd never experienced anything like it. I walked onto the stage, and for the first time, waves of hate were coming up off the audience, and it just I was wearing these ridiculous shoes and a wig, and it was like, and it just fired me up. It's like I haven't even said anything yet.
Wait till I get started.
so so she was a lot of fun.
I love playing villains. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I guess whenever I play them, I can't think of them as a villain, but it's
Right.
really
Right.
fun and relaxing to play characters that aren't very nice. It's like a nice breath of fresh air.
Right. Right. And they're always right. So it was very fun to get that new casting range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I remember one thing that, like, one of the things that stands out when you were saying how much you would see your classmate change
Mm-hmm.
when you were at the learning Alexander with them. I remember one of my classmates, this drastic change in how he walked, and I don't think I'll call him out, although it was a good thing. But
Mm-hmm.
his walk normally showed what he was doing. I feel like he was a very smart person, and he got things done. And
Mm-hmm.
his walk showed that he did that because there was an extra heaviness on each step.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, I think you remember this too.
I
And
do.
then when he had his coordination, and he let go of all of that extra, and it was like he was gliding across a space, and all of a sudden he just turned into this sexy leading man character.
Yeah.
And I remember the whole class was like, whoa.
Yes.
And he seemed to get a little bit like embarrassed, but also like more confident from it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so amazing to see so quickly how something like that could change his physicality, because yeah, like if he was
Mm-hmm.
getting that note the way that I a, I would say a typical director would, in
Mm-hmm.
my experience, of just, well, be confident, well, walk like this or do this, more like
Mm-hmm.
external. I don't know if when that would have happened, you know?
Right, because there was some perfect reason in his underlying coordination that he walked that way. So when he changed his idea about that and was able to coordinate head spine with a new idea, it was quite
Yeah.
a spectacular shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think he'd been working it up to it for a while. So,
Yeah.
but sometimes people do shift that quickly. It's really had people in one lesson go, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
I had a really fun session with a student the other day who we were getting into a moment where she was supposed to be crying because she was
mm-hmm,
devastated. And I noticed that she could access anger a lot easier than devastation, which
mm-hmm,
I think generally is how it is for most people especially when you're starting out as acting. It's
yeah.
kind of easier to get that layer than the other.
Mm-hmm,
But just it was cool, like reading her body and seeing her body to see that resistance, and then
mm,
saying, well, what if you don't have to be devastated? Let's just see what happens if you're angry, but you get so
yes.
angry. Like, let's try it that way. And I gave her a little piece of resistance to push against so
Mm-hmm,
she could get that struggle in her
mm-hmm,
body. And
mm-hmm.
it was so cool because when she did it again and then her voice broke, how it would, if and
Yeah.
it's like it's yeah, like it's a gift, what I got to learn, of course, from you
Mm-hmm,
and my amazing teachers, of just for me as an actor. But it's so helpful working with people because I don't have to be attached to, well, this is the way
mm-hmm.
that you learn it, and this is the technique, and if you do it this way, then it's right. It's like, it really doesn't matter what I say. It matters if it's affecting you. I mean,
Yes.
not to say, but
Yes.
okay, yeah, right. And
Mm-hmm,
so I'm like, yeah, there's all sorts of ways in, and
mm-hmm,
and it's great to be able to see what somebody's like, see if my words are effective by how it's translating in their body.
Yes,
And then like,
that's
great, well, let's get off of this note and let me try something else, you know?
exactly.
It was so
Exactly.
awesome.
Hurrah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's that is uh, it is such a gift to know this stuff. I've
Yeah.
known it long enough. I can't quite remember not knowing it, but sometimes I know people all find their way. How do we find our way to the best way to approach something? And this
Right.
just gives us this quick little tool
Yeah.
that makes all of those choices just a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
like for actors too. And I feel like well, I know it's been said most of the actors' work is looking for work. You
Yes.
know, you're mostly
Yes.
just looking for work, and occasionally you land the job.
Hmm.
And but even when you're at the audition or when you're with the director, I find so much of my work is translating what they're saying, because
Hmm.
we don't always speak the same language, even though we're speaking the same language. So it's just
Hmm.
like as if I were my student in that example.
Hmm.
But if my director wasn't able to translate for me, because most directors aren't actors,
Yes.
you know, and so
Hmm.
they might be saying the same thing, the same note, but it's like, okay, well, if they're saying it again, clearly something is missing. What is it that my body needs to do then?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just wrapping it back around to what you were saying,
Hmm.
you know, at least they could see your work then.
Right.
At least they could see you're shifting, you're doing something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
It is. It is. And you can, I mean, I suppose I'll just throw in this, you don't have to leave what you're doing to use it. I think that's one of the gold pieces of gold of the technique, is that you don't have to set aside a time in the day to do a set of exercises. Once you know this, you just use it as you flow from thing to thing to thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. I'm gonna
Yeah.
try it when you're having a glass of wine later today, or taking your dog for a walk, or
Yep.
you know, practical applications.
Hmm.
Neat. Well, I shouldn't take too much more of your time because we're almost at the hour now, but I just want to make sure, was there anything else that you wanted to share about how performance has improved your life, or the Alexander
Mm,
technique? Because I see there's
mm.
obviously a huge range.
There is a huge range.
Yeah.
I I think that all of them have led me to hmm, constructive conscious kindness to myself in a way that also deepens my ability to be constructive consciously kind in the world.
I feel that for myself as well, that what I've learned in my acting process has made me a better human, and has helped
Hmm.
me to relate to people even better, and myself, and with less judgment, you
Hmm.
know. But, or I should say, and that's also a choice that I make. It's not something that, you know, I meet every
Hmm.
actor and we're all trying to be
Hmm.
enlightened. It's
Right.
like, it's a choice.
It's a choice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
want to ask you again,
Hmm.
when you say kind, what do you think
Hmm.
of when you use the word kind?
What I hmm, what I think of is it would include what you were talking, what we often talk about as non-judgment. It includes, I suppose I'm going to just, it sounds a little corny, but it's love. It's really love to yourself and love to the world. But that thing, that it needs to start with you so that you're able to carry it into the world. And so relationally, it means, it's so interesting. What an interesting question. So I'm thinking of things like deep listening to someone always as if it's the first time. And that's going to be whole self listening. So it carries you in that way with curiosity and again, care, kindness, but care for or honor for the spirit of each individual. And yeah, and a kind of wonder in that, but always new.
Yeah. And as we're talking about this even more, I'm also thinking of the ways in which, if we're not careful as humans, we can do centration on our life. Mm-hmm. And that kindness is that, brings it all out into
brings
it all in. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Daniel Siegel talks about kindness being the natural outcome of a full self-integration. So perhaps it's so there's a relationship to the Alexander technique in his definition, but it is important that it includes the world, which would lead us in. I use the word biopsychosocial to describe wholeness now. That leads us in a whole other direction. Because we are a self in a world.
Yes.
Which is perhaps more apparent to all of us at the current moment. So.
Yes.
So
I had an interesting moment earlier before the podcast with social media, and it was. I'm just yes, I am talking about this right now, but okay. It was with somebody who I do not share the same views with, but who I know cares about my well-being, and so it was an interesting thing of, I'm realizing what I did now is I did remind myself to align with what I believe and all of the information instead of just reacting. And I'm not usually one to fly off the handle in anger anyway, except for when I play those characters.
Yes.
but it was actually really neat to see what can happen when, we react from that space of taking in all of the information and remembering to still honor the person, which, can be successful to varying degrees. But in this case, we were able to have a nice conversation, and neither one of us changed our mind, but it did feel like there was a certain, another little bit of openness that was there, because it was as if we were acknowledging what, I'm going to see you and you're going to see me. And we're just going to say, your life matters. And it'd be great if you agreed with me on more things, but you don't. So, so go in peace. No,
go in peace. Well, right.
Yeah. So, I hope everyone can take lessons from Cathy. So I'm so happy that she's here. You could use it for everything in your life. I truly believe in it can improve it. And so be sure to look up more of her information at Cathy Madden or www.cathymadden.net. She's teaching all over the world, right, as well with Zoom. And then, of course, be sure to check out her book. And of course, if you're looking for a coach to also help you with performance skills so that you can, for auditions, for personal development, public speaking, relationship, anything really, because that voice, body, mind connection, it's useful. So I'm always, it's useful, and it can bring you more joy and more ease in whatever you're going through. So I'm always happy to help. Feel free to reach me at beyondtechniquecoaching@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you, Samantha.
Of course. Stay safe and stay healthy.